A little bit of a history on stablecoins to give some more context. So this is a market cap chart that shows all stablecoins. The first stablecoin that's really notable was Tether, which was launched in November of 2014. And as you can see, that there's essentially zero market cap at that time, and today we're about $200 billion of stablecoin market cap. Some important events that happened over time: in May of 2018, Circle launched USDC. That's the second largest stablecoin today. September of 2018 and September of 2019, Paxos launches USDP and Binance USD. And there was also a launch of Gemini's US dollar denominated stablecoin GUSD. And those are important because those are the only fully regulated stablecoins that are available on chain. And I'll talk about what that means in a minute. In the summer of 2020 was called sort of the DeFi summer. And this is when these DeFi use cases really became available and accessible to a large majority of people. And that's really what drove the rapid growth in stablecoins. And you can see sort of this inflection point from 2020 going forward. Also in 2020, Terra, which is a crypto-backed stablecoin, launched, and that's actually the fourth largest stablecoin today, which is pretty remarkable considering it's only been 16 months since it launched, and it's now the fourth largest. And then the last couple of points: in early 2021, MasterCard and Visa announced that they were going to start settling in stablecoin, just an example of these mainstream use cases starting to take off. And then in April of 2021, we see that DeFi total value locked, which is really just a metric for the amount of activity taking place in DeFi, reached $100 billion. Again, pretty remarkable considering DeFi didn't really exist before 2018. So within 2 years, 2 or 3 years, it's reached 100 billion. And literally 6 months after that, DeFi reached $200 billion of total value locked. So you can kind of get a sense of what's driving the huge growth in stablecoin market cap. So with all that being said, there's a bunch of stablecoins out there, and I wanted to talk a little bit about what are the things that distinguish one stablecoin from another, because it can be fairly confusing: Tether versus Circle versus this versus that. And so I find a helpful way of thinking about this is to ask, if you were to choose a stablecoin to use, either as an individual or suppose you represented some sort of institution, what stablecoin would you choose and why? And there's really 5 dimensions that I want to talk about today. The first is the peg, this is pretty straightforward. It's literally, what is the stablecoin pegged against? Do I want it pegged against the dollar, against the euro, whatever? And that's just a choice. Every stablecoin is pegged against one thing and one thing only. And so you just choose the peg that you're looking for. And then there's peg stability, which is like, how tightly does that stablecoin actually trade around its peg? Is it always trading at $1? Is it a little bit more, a little bit less? And related to that is, what's the profile of the reserve assets behind it? Because that's a very important mechanism for maintaining that peg stability. The third is regulation. And really the question here is, what's the degree of regulation on the issuer and on the reserves? The fourth is liquidity, meaning are there deep and liquid markets that enable you to trade in and out of this stablecoin at any time, at any volume? And related to that is, how easy is it to issue or redeem these tokens? And that's an important part of liquidity, because the liquidity that is on chain is created through the issuance of stablecoin. So you need to think about both. And then the last is availability. What blockchains and what protocols do you want to use? And is the stablecoin you're thinking about using actually supported in those places? So with that being said, I'm going to go through 4 of these in detail. I'm going to skip over the peg because that's pretty straightforward. It is what it is. And you just decide, do you want USD or gold or whatever? So I want to talk about the last 4. In terms of peg stability, there's a few different ways to look at this, but I find that this is a helpful framing. So what I'm showing here are 3 different stablecoins, and they're different types. We've got Tether, we've got Terra, we've got Paxos. Tether is the largest stablecoin. It's an $81 billion market cap stablecoin. It is an unregulated stablecoin that is backed by fiat reserves. You have Terra, which is, as I mentioned, the 4th largest stablecoin by market cap, $16 billion. This is a crypto-backed stablecoin. It's actually only partially reserved, which means that less than 100% of the value of UST is actually backed by a crypto asset in reserve. And they're using an algorithm to maintain their peg. It's fairly complicated beyond the scope of this conversation, but that's a type of stablecoin that's becoming very popular. And then USDP, Paxos, we are a regulated stablecoin 100% in fiat reserves. And we're relatively small at $1 billion. And so when we talk about peg stability, we can think about that in terms of the trading range. So I've just looked at a 24-hour trading range and looked at the high and low for each of these coins within that range. And you can see that the range is fairly tight for Tether. It's 4/100ths of a penny. And USDP, owing to a smaller market cap and therefore less liquidity, is about 45/100ths of a penny. Does that matter? I think that's like the question. You're looking at this as an individual. Do I care? Probably not, right? If you're trading in and out of these coins regularly, then the pluses and minuses will even themselves out. Even if you're trading sometimes for less than $1 and sometimes for more than $1, this will probably net out over time. So given that it's going to net out over time, the ranges are small. Like, why am I talking about this, and why do we care? Well, the reason we care is that this is like a pretty normal 24-hour trading window. And the question is, what happens in extreme events? And so I want to tell you a little brief story about a stablecoin that was launched in 2021 called Iron. So Iron was issued by Iron Finance. And this was one of the first partially reserved crypto-backed stablecoins. So again, the reserves do not represent 100% of the value of the Iron stablecoin outstanding. And that meant that to achieve peg stability, it used an algorithm rather than the guarantee of redemption. So they never guaranteed that you could come and redeem your Iron for a fiat US dollar the way that someone like a Paxos would. And so what that meant is everyone was hoping that the smart contract, the algorithm, this partial reserve management could maintain the peg. And effectively what happened in just a few months after it was launched is there was a day of extreme volatility, and the Iron stablecoin, which was intended to trade at $1, fell to 75 cents, which for a stablecoin is probably the worst thing that can happen. The reasons this happened was somewhat complex and had to do with the design of the system that they were using to maintain the peg. And it's probably been fixed in other stablecoins. But the reason I'm bringing this up is this category of stablecoin is relatively new, and depending on how you look at it, somewhat untested. It's not to say it can't work. It's not to say it won't work. It's just to say that this is an emerging category and there's a lot of possibilities in this space, a lot of which were unforeseen. Like in this case, this particular issue was unforeseen. And the point is, I'm hoping this gives you an appreciation for sort of the trade-off between a decentralized stablecoin like this with a crypto-backed reserve versus a centralized stablecoin, which has its own trade-offs, but with a fiat reserve. So that being said, let me talk for a minute about what those fiat reserves look like. Again, for the category of fiat reserve stablecoins.